My name is Evelyn Hart, and I am 63 years old. For most of my life, I believed I had built a quiet, dependable existence, one grounded in routine, compassion, and a commitment to doing the right thing even when no one was watching. I never thought of myself as exceptional. I paid my bills on time, baked for the neighbors, and kept a tidy little home on the edge of town. If loyalty were a currency, I always felt rich. My parents, Arthur and May, were once the kind of people others admired. Dad was a retired math teacher who prided himself on discipline. Mom was a homemaker whose life revolved around church raffles and neighborhood gossip. They were strict, yes, but I assumed that age would soften the hard edges. Instead, it sharpened them in ways I didn't recognize until it was too late. For years, I helped them quietly. I handled their medications, coordinated their appointments, drove them to physical therapy, and sorted their insurance paperwork. I never asked for praise. But I believed, naively, that my parents at least saw the effort. I believed we shared a bond built on mutual respect, even if we rarely spoke it aloud. But something changed the year my father's mobility declined. My younger brother, Caleb, who had always lived in the shadow of his own poor decisions, suddenly inserted himself back into their lives. He visited once every few weeks and left early if a game was on. Yet for reasons I couldn't understand at first, my parents began praising him publicly while quietly disregarding the help I provided daily. Still, I tried not to see malice where there might have been confusion. They were aging. They were stressed. I told myself that love didn't require acknowledgement. But I should have noticed the signs, the abrupt shift in tone, the hushed calls between them when I entered the room, the way my mother began asking, "Are you sure you can afford that?" in a voice that felt less like concern and more like accusation. Something was coming, and I felt it like static in the air before a storm. The truth, as I would soon discover, was far more painful than simple misunderstanding. And once it surfaced, it would tear the last threads of our family narrative apart. Everything began with a phone call on a Tuesday morning in April, the kind of call that sounds harmless at first. My mother asked me to stop by for a quick chat. Her voice sounded too sweet. Too rehearsed. And as I drove to their house, I had no idea that this would be the day the foundation of my life cracked. What awaited me inside that living room wasn't confusion or forgetfulness. It was betrayal. And I wasn't prepared for how deeply it would cut. When I walked through their door, the first words out of my mother's mouth made my stomach drop, because she said them loud enough for someone else to hear. "Why did you refuse to help us, Evelyn?" Those were the first words my mother hurled across the living room as I stepped inside. She said them sharply, but not to me. She said them toward the hallway, where I soon realized Caleb was standing with his arms folded over his chest. He raised an eyebrow as if he were witnessing a courtroom drama, not his own family unraveling. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what are you talking about?" Mom launched into a speech she had clearly rehearsed. "Your father and I needed financial help. We told you about the roof repairs. And you said no. You told us you didn't care. Caleb had to step in because you refused." I stared at her, stunned. None of it was true. In fact, I had paid half the deposit for the roof repair myself. I still had the receipt in my purse. "Mom, that's not." "Don't make excuses," Caleb interrupted, his voice thick with self-righteousness. "You've ignored them for years. They're embarrassed, you know. They didn't want to say anything, but someone had to." I felt my pulse beating behind my eyes. "Mom, I come here almost every day. I take Dad to his appointments. I've handled your medication refills for months. What is this?" Mom crossed her arms and looked away. "Caleb told us you've been telling people we're a burden. That you're tired of doing everything for us." I turned slowly toward my brother. "You told them that?" He didn't flinch. "Well, isn't it true? You're always stressed. Always complaining to someone." "I've never complained about helping them," I said. "Not once. I am exhausted because I've been doing everything while you show up for an hour every other Sunday." Caleb smirked. Maybe if you managed your life better, you wouldn't feel overwhelmed. There it was. The twist. The manufactured narrative. The slow, careful manipulation of two aging parents who were vulnerable to flattery from the child they always favored. I felt hurt simmer into something quieter but sharper. Something that made me see beyond the words to the real motive: money. Approval. Control. Mom, Dad, I said softly, where is this coming from? Dad wasn't in the living room. When I peeked down the hall, I realized why. He was in his wheelchair, turned away, staring at the wall. As if ashamed. Dad? I asked gently. He didn't turn around. Mom said, we've made our decision. We're putting Caleb in charge of our finances going forward. You've done enough damage. Damage. The word lodged itself in my throat like a stone. Caleb added, we've also contacted a lawyer to modify the estate documents. For the best. I felt my breath catch. You're changing your will based on lies? We're correcting a mistake, Mom said simply. Caleb must have enjoyed the moment. His eyes gleamed with victory. And then Mom said the sentence that would alter the course of everything that happened next. We told the lawyer you refused to help us. We told him you abandoned us. My knees went weak. Because if there was one thing I had never done, it was abandon my parents. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was written into legal documents now. And they believed Caleb over me. I walked out that door shaking, unaware that this lie would soon spread far beyond the family, and ruin my reputation in ways I couldn't imagine. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel with fingers gone numb. Betrayal from strangers is survivable. But betrayal from your own blood? That carves into the heart differently. As I sat in my driveway, memories rose uninvited, uncoiling like vines. Caleb had always been the favorite. The golden boy. The charmer with the sly grin. I was the responsible one, the one who stayed home from parties to babysit him, the one who turned down scholarships to remain close to my parents. They praised me when convenient and ignored me when it wasn't. I thought adulthood would balance things out. But family patterns don't dissolve simply because children grow older. They calcify. They harden into unspoken expectations. Dad expected me to manage the household details. Mom expected me to handle emotional labor. And Caleb expected to be admired for showing up at all. Growing up, he lied easily, effortlessly. A missing 20 from Mom's purse, a dented car, a failed course, somehow the stories always twisted until he appeared innocent and someone else carried the blame. Usually me. I should have recognized the signs. I should have known that old patterns don't disappear, they resurface when the stakes are highest. But I wasn't helpless. Not anymore. And I wasn't the exhausted, compliant child they remembered. I was 63, still sharp-minded, and decades wiser. And I kept records, of everything. Every appointment I scheduled. Every bill I covered. Every receipt. Every message. I had done it out of habit, but now those habits might be the only shield I had left. The next week, the consequences began. A neighbor approached me at the grocery store, thin-lipped and hesitant. I heard your parents needed help, but you were too busy. Another woman from church pulled me aside, saying, we're praying for you. It's never too late to reconcile with your family. Caleb was poisoning the community, drip by drip. And my parents? They weren't correcting anyone. But the worst blow came during a routine appointment at my father's clinic. I approached the reception desk to confirm the next visit. The receptionist, who had always been kind, said in a voice that trembled with discomfort, I didn't think you were still involved in your father's care. Why wouldn't I be? I asked. She swallowed. I was told you refused to help anymore. I thanked her, left the clinic, and sat in the car trembling with fury. They hadn't just changed the will. They had rewritten the narrative of my character. And in a small town, reputation is oxygen. Once someone steals it, you suffocate. But I wasn't going to suffocate quietly. I began combing through my files that same night, every email, every invoice, every calendar screenshot. I compiled everything meticulously, organized by date, labeled, time-stamped, and undeniable. Because if they wanted a story, I would give them the truth. What I didn't know yet was that the lawyer handling my parents' documents had been watching everything unfold, and soon he would call me with news that changed the entire game. The call came early on a Saturday morning. "This is Attorney Paul Granger," the voice said. "I believe we need to speak." My stomach tightened, not in fear, but in recognition. I had been preparing for this moment. He continued, "Your parents asked me to finalize some documents involving your brother. Before I proceed, I need to verify certain statements they made." I took a breath. "I understand." We agreed to meet at his office the following Monday. As I hung up, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about stopping a pattern of manipulation that had shaped my entire life. For the next 2 days, I worked methodically. I compiled a master folder, the same way I once prepared project audits during my years as a school administrator. Organized. Detailed. Bulletproof. I included receipts for every roof repair payment, gas mileage logs for every appointment, screenshots of medication reminders I sent my parents, email confirmations from clinics with my name as the primary contact, copies of the health insurance disputes I handled, photographs date stamped from visits to their home, the spreadsheet showing every expense I personally covered. It wasn't spite. It was truth, cold, verifiable, and irrefutable. By the time Monday arrived, the binder was thick enough to make a thud when placed on a desk. When I arrived at the attorney's office, I expected a formal conversation. I did not expect what happened instead. Mr. Granger gestured to the chair across from his desk. His eyes were kind but professional, the eyes of a man who had seen far too many families implode. He folded his hands. "Your parents insisted you have refused financial and physical assistance for years. Your brother said you do not participate in their care." I met his gaze without flinching. "That is a lie." "I suspected as much," he said quietly. I frowned. "Why?" He leaned back. "Because your father slipped. He mentioned you were the one who handled the clinic billing last month. If you had truly abandoned them, that wouldn't be the case." For a moment, something warm flickered in my chest, something like vindication, but heavier. I handed him the binder. He opened it, and for the next hour, the only sounds were the turning of pages and his soft exhalations of disbelief. Finally, he closed the binder gently. "Mrs. Hart, these records are impeccable." "Thank you," I said softly. He tapped the cover. "Would you be willing to bring this to a joint meeting with your parents and brother? I believe clarity is needed." I hesitated. I knew what that meant. A confrontation. A reckoning. "Yes," I said. "I'll be there." He nodded. "I'll schedule it." As I left the office, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. But confrontation is never simple. And when the day arrived, my parents did not come quietly. Because when we all sat at that conference table, the first thing my mother said was, "I hope you're happy, Evelyn, you've made a scene before we've even begun." My mother's opening jab hung in the air like a wasp, sharp and buzzing with accusation. She sat beside Caleb, who looked far too comfortable. My father wheeled in silently, avoiding my eyes. Attorney Granger cleared his throat. "We're here to establish facts. I'd like everyone to remain respectful." Mom scoffed but said nothing more. Granger began with a simple question. "Arthur, May, are you still asserting that your daughter Evelyn has refused to assist you over the past several years?" Mom lifted her chin. "Absolutely." Dad muttered, "Yes, that was the understanding." Caleb leaned back smugly. Granger opened the binder. "Then we need to address discrepancies." He turned to page 1 and angled it toward my parents. This is a roofing invoice. It shows Evelyn paid half the deposit. Mom frowned. Well, maybe she paid that one time, but... He turned another page. This is a calendar log showing Evelyn drove Arthur to 12 physical therapy sessions in October. Caleb rolled his eyes. Anyone can make a calendar entry. Granger lifted a printed email. These are appointment confirmations sent directly from the clinic, listing Evelyn as the transportation contact. The room went still. Granger continued, methodical and calm. Here are the medication refill approvals. Here is insurance correspondence. Here are grocery receipts for specialized foods Arthur needs for his diet. Mom's voice cracked. I didn't know she kept all this. I looked at her gently. You never asked what I did. You just assumed the worst. Caleb snorted. So what? She helped a little. That doesn't mean she wasn't complaining or talking behind your backs. Granger lifted a stack of emails. These are messages from Evelyn to home health providers. Clear, professional communication. No evidence of resentment. Caleb's smile wavered. And here, Granger added, are text messages from all of you, praising her, thanking her, acknowledging her role. Mom's eyes flicked to Caleb. You said she. Caleb's face reddened. I told you what I believed. No, I said softly. You told them what benefited you. For the first time, my father turned toward me. Really turned. His voice was thin, fragile. Why didn't you say anything earlier, Evie? I did, I said. You just didn't want to hear it. Silence spread slowly, thick and undeniable. Then Granger delivered the blow none of them expected. Had these lies been entered into legal documents, he said, the changes would not only have been invalid, but potentially fraudulent. My mother gasped. My brother stiffened. Granger looked them each in the eye. The record shows Evelyn has been your primary caregiver. Your accusations have no factual basis. My father's face crumpled. My mother reached for the binder with trembling hands. Caleb opened his mouth to protest, but no sound came out. And for the first time in my life, the silence in that room was not heavy with guilt on my part. It was heavy with truth finally landing where it belonged. Then Attorney Granger said he had one more document to reveal, and when he opened the folder, Caleb's expression turned from smugness to fear. Attorney Granger placed a thin file on the table. This, he said calmly, was submitted by Caleb 2 weeks ago. My brother stiffened. That was private. Granger shook his head. When you petition to become financial guardian for your parents, nothing is private. My mother's head whipped around. Financial guardian? Caleb, what is he talking about? My father's expression drained of color. I felt my breath still. Caleb stammered, It was just paperwork. Just a precaution. Granger opened the file. Inside were forms petitioning the court to give Caleb full authority over my parents' accounts, assets, and medical decisions. It named me as unreliable and emotionally unstable, citing fabricated incidents, none of which had ever occurred. Mom's voice trembled. Caleb, why? He snapped, because someone had to take control. You two can't manage everything yourselves, and Evelyn has been the only one managing anything, I said. My voice was low, steady. You plan to cut me out completely. Financially. Legally. Publicly. His jaw clenched. You never understand. You're the favorite, not me. You always got the praise. I stared at him in disbelief. What praise? I spent my entire life being overlooked. Dad looked down at his hands. Caleb, we didn't know you filed this. Granger tapped the table. Mr. and Mrs. Hart, if this petition had gone through, Caleb would have had full control of your estate. Evelyn would have been legally barred from involvement. My mother pressed her hand against her mouth. You tried to take everything. Caleb's mask cracked. I was trying to protect you. No, I said. You were trying to position yourself as the savior. You manipulated them. You lied about me. And you almost succeeded. For a moment, the room felt suspended in time. Then my father spoke, voice trembling. Evie, is all of this true? You did all these things for us? Yes, Dad, I said softly. Every day. Even when it hurt. Mom wiped her face with a tissue. We accused you without asking. We believed Caleb without question. Caleb shot to his feet. You're all unbelievable. He pointed at me. You're just trying to make me look bad. I stood slowly, meeting his glare without blinking. You did that yourself. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. The three of us, my parents and I, sat in the aftermath, the air thick with revelation and regret. For once, they didn't look at me with suspicion. They looked at me with something that resembled recognition. And maybe fear. My mother whispered, Evie, what happens now? I didn't answer immediately. Because forgiveness is not instant. And accountability isn't optional. But I knew what came next. A new story. One written with truth instead of lies. The consequences came swiftly, much faster than any of us expected, and they changed the family dynamic forever. The fallout began within 48 hours. Attorney Granger filed a formal withdrawal of Caleb's guardianship petition, citing misrepresentation. The court flagged his petition for potential review, triggering an inquiry into his financial history. My parents were shocked to learn that Caleb had significant debts he had hoped to resolve by gaining access to their accounts. My mother cried when she found out. My father sat silently for nearly the entire afternoon. Then came the community shift. Once word spread, accurately this time, that the lawyer had reviewed Evelyn's documentation, people's attitudes changed. Soft apologies. Awkward smiles. Neighbors bringing over casseroles as if baked goods could erase months of whispered rumors. The clinic staff was the first to speak plainly. We always knew something wasn't right, the receptionist told me. We're glad you cleared it up. I appreciated the sentiment, but beneath the politeness lay a truth: reputations are fragile. And rebuilding trust takes time. As for Caleb, the consequences for him were unavoidable. He sent my parents frantic messages, alternating between denial, blame, and rage. They didn't respond. For the first time in their lives, they saw him clearly. He showed up at their house once, pounding on the door. My father, frail, weary, refused to let him inside. I wasn't there that day, but later my mother told me, it was the first time your father stood up to him. It broke something open inside her. My parents asked to meet with me privately. When I arrived, they looked smaller somehow, older, humbled. My mother spoke first. I don't know how to ask for forgiveness, she said. We hurt you. We didn't listen. We failed you. My father added, I should have known better than to believe anyone over you. You've always been steady. Always dependable. Their words weren't enough to erase the hurt, but they mattered. Then came the moment that surprised me most. We want you, my mother said softly, to become our power of attorney. Not Caleb. Not anyone else. I hesitated. Are you sure? My father nodded. You're the only one who has acted in our best interest. It was a solemn moment, one heavy with responsibility and fragile reconciliation. But I accepted. Not out of obligation. Out of clarity. Caleb's actions had forced a reckoning that was long overdue. Later that night, I looked through the binder again, not to reassure myself, but to remind myself of something important. When you act with integrity, you don't need to fear the truth. Because the truth stands on its own. But even with justice served, I wasn't prepared for the final conversation, the one where I confronted Caleb face to face. I met Caleb at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. He had insisted on one last conversation. I agreed, not for him, but for myself. He arrived looking thinner, angrier, restless in the way only guilty people are. He sat across from me, tapping his foot. "You won," he said bitterly. "Happy now?" "This wasn't about winning," I replied. "It was about protecting the truth." He scoffed. "You always act like you're better than everyone." "I'm not better," I said calmly. "I'm just not willing to destroy people to get what I want." He looked away, jaw tight. I continued, "You lied. You manipulated our parents. You tried to take control for your own benefit. And you nearly succeeded." He didn't deny it. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a voice quieter than I expected, he asked, "Do they hate me?" "No," I said. "They're hurt. And hurt takes time." He swallowed hard. "I never meant for it to go that far." "Yes," I said. "You did. But you didn't expect to be caught." He flinched. I stood, gathering my bag. "This is the boundary, Caleb. I won't participate in your cycles anymore. If you want a relationship with our parents, it will have to be on honest terms. And if you ever try something like this again, I will protect them, and myself." He didn't respond. I left him sitting there, alone with the consequences he created. When I arrived home, I felt light, not triumphant, not vengeful, but grounded. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, steady and unwavering. In the weeks that followed, my parents and I rebuilt slowly. They apologized often. I accepted gradually. Healing isn't linear, but it's possible when everyone is willing to do the work. And every time I opened that binder, I felt the same quiet truth. Documentation is not distrust. Documentation is self-respect. I learned something valuable through all of it. When people lie about who you are, don't argue. Don't beg. Don't shrink. Just gather the truth. Stand still. And let the facts speak for you. Thank you for listening to my story. If you'd like more stories like this, stories of truth, justice, and quiet strength, let me know what title you want to hear next.